Welcome, friends. Today we will continue talks on the winter solstice. This talk is titled Solstice, the Sun Cycle. Every first and third Sunday we have a roundtable reading and discussion of a particular topic. Today being the first Sunday of January at 12:30 p.m. we will continue with our study of the Bhagavad Gita and related notes. Next Sunday at 11 a.m. there will be a presentation on the dynamics of brotherhood. We'd love for you to join us for these meetings here at 4865A Cordell Avenue, Bethesda, Maryland. It's the Washington, D.C. area, where we study pure Theosophy, which we know is a life to be lived at all times. The United Lodge of Theosophists Declaration is, the policy of this lodge is independent devotion to the cause of Theosophy without professing attachment to any theosophical organization. It is loyal to the great founders of the Theosophical movement, but does not concern itself with dissensions or differences of individual opinion. The work it has on hand and the end it keeps in view are too absorbing and too loftily to leave it the time or inclination to take part in side issues. That work and that end is the dissemination of the fundamental principles of the philosophy of Theosophy and the exemplification and practice of those principles through a truer realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. It holds that the unassailable basis for union among Theosophists, wherever and however situated, the similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching, and therefore has neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers, the sole bond between its associates being that basis. And it aims to disseminate this idea among Theosophists in the furtherance of unity. It regards as Theosophists all who are engaged in the true service of humanity, without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization, and it welcomes to its association all those who are in accord with its declared purposes and who desire to fit themselves, by study and otherwise, to be the better able to help and teach others. The true Theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all. The form signed by associates who choose to do so says being in sympathy with the purpose of this lodge as set forth in this declaration, I hereby record my desire to be enrolled as an associate, it being understood that such association calls for no obligation on my part other than that which I myself determine. The reading today is from the Voice of the Silence, starting here on page 38. Act thou for them today, and they will act for thee tomorrow. 'Tis from the bud of renunciation of the self that springeth the sweet fruit of final liberation. To perish, doomed to see, who out of fear of Mara refrains from helping man, lest he should act for self. The pilgrim who would cool his weary limbs in running waters, yet dares not plunge for terror of the stream, risks to succumb from heat. Inaction based on selfish fear cannot bear but evil fruit. The selfish devotee lives to no purpose. A man who does not go through his appointed work in life has lived in vain. Follow the wheel of life. Follow the wheel of duty to race and kin, to friend and foe, and close our mind to pleasures as to pain. Exhaust the law of karmic retribution. Gain cities for thy future birth. If sun thou cannot be, then be the humble planet. If thou art debarred from flaming like the noonday sun upon the snow-capped mountains, of purity eternal, then choose only a humbler course. Point out the way, however dimly and lost among the host, as does the evening star to those who tread their path in darkness. Behold Migmar, as his crimson veils his eyes sweeps over slumbering earth. Behold the fiery aura of the hand of Lakpa extended in protective love over the heads of his ascetics. Both are now servants of Nyami, left in his absence silent watchers in the night. Yet both in Calber's past are bright Nyamis, and may in future days again become two suns. Such are the falls and rises of the karmic law of nature. Be Olanu like them. Give light and comfort to the toiling pilgrim, and seek out him who knows still less than thou, who in his wretched desolation sits starving for the bread of wisdom, and the bread which feeds the shadow, without a teacher, hope, or consolation, and let him hear the law. And now for today's talk, Solstice, the Sun Cycle.
Welcome, friends. We heard last week a little bit about the solstice, and it is important to relate it to the cycle of December 21, which starts that cycle, and it continues on in different aspects of it all through the year, even though last week we only discussed it until the summer solstice. It was stated that this sun cycle, which starts on the 21st, is looking at nature and nature's gods, and venerating living human Mahatmas as witnessing the potentiality and evolution of the soul. There's a tremendous difference between 21st and the 25th from the traditional and philosophical aspect of it. In the pagan occult tradition, the time of winter solstice appears to have been connected with the mysteries of initiation. However, the West, having lost the meaning and times of the cycles, has kind of telescoped itself into a single historical period in the long history of the soul in its journey to the self. So then, what should be a daily initiation has become a long past event in the life of another being, mysterious, unique, and finished. So then December 21st starts the winter solstice, and we just heard that it is the mysteries of initiation that starts on that day. And since we look at nature and nature's gods, not just God, nature's gods, because these gods are synonymous with nature. We're looking at the human soul and its potentiality into initiation into the mysteries. So then, what should be the significance of the Christmas cycle? What will it mean to each of us? And is there a sense in which each incarnated being enacts the sun god rite and adheres to a yearly cycle like the suns? So how should the real man celebrate this period between 21 and 25? So the real man is this self, which is coexistence with the one self, one oversoul. HPP in the Secret Doctrine has a passage which we will quote from. She gives an account of a 3-day ceremony of initiation called the Sleep of Siloam in the traditions of Asia Minor, Syria, and even Higher Egypt to this day. So this is still going on. The initiated adept, writes she, who had successfully passed through all the trials, was attached, not nailed, but simply tied on a couch in the form of a towel. Which is a swastika without the 4 additional prolongations. And the neophyte plunged into a deep sleep. He was allowed to remain in this state for 3 days and 3 nights, during which time his spiritual ego was set to confabulate with the gods, descend into Hades, Amenti, or Patala. Of course, these 3 are simply designations for 3 different countries, as you can tell, and do works of charity to the invisible beings, whether souls of men or elemental spirits, his body remaining all the time in a temple crypt or subterranean cave. In Egypt, it was placed in the sarcophagus in the king's chamber of the pyramid of Cheops, and carried during the night of the approaching 3rd day to the entrance of a gallery, where at a certain hour the beams of the rising sun struck full on the face of the entrance candidate, who awoke to be initiated by Osiris and Thoth, the god of wisdom. Then appeared the Hierophants initiators, and the sacramental words were pronounced ostensibly to the sun Osiris. Of course, this means that it was really addressed in reality to the spirit sun within, enlightening the newly born man. So then, the spirit sun is internal to each human being. So then, this is the crucifixion of the Christian world. How different than the one that is described in the Secret Doctrine. So does not man's daily cycle, to say nothing of his year, invariably include an interval of godlike existence, a solstice when the soul is still in its own place? And each one of us as souls comes each day into the darkness of the world where souls are still asleep. How many souls are really awake to the internal life of the soul life is what really we should be asking. Because all our daily activity takes place here on earth in relationship to others. Are they awake or are they asleep? And when we look at the great nature, the sleep of living things is much longer than man's. And one purpose of observing the season cycle is that mind beings and reach the awakening in the spring by works of charity in the time of solstice. So this is the importance of December 21. We talked about all of the gods descending on earth on the 25th. And here HPB describes an initiate awakening 3 days after the deep sleep that the perfected being is entranced during this period. So on the 3 days later, he wakes up, and what is the meaning of it? All of these nature gods, the powers of nature, then are able to descend to our plane and to assist us in our endeavors, if that endeavor is for the whole. Please remember, last week we talked about the crest cycle of the wave, which was the simile made, that we need to correspond that cycle of nature, which is at its highest level, with our own highest level. So in each human soul's life, that also is present. And during this period, this is very furtive for us to undertake in our own lives. So these mind beings then awaken those souls who are ready to be awakened, in other words. And what does that mean? Well, in all of the writings it says to ask. Who are we asking? There is no God out there to ask, but these nature gods are all available to assist us. And we'll talk a little bit about that a little bit further on. So that means that the works of charity that they undertake during the solstice does not stop there. The thoughts and deeds of men are reflected in all the spheres of being. Since man, having achieved the consciousness of self, individuality is the prototype, the microcosm, the goal, the initiator, and the guide of the rest of nature. But while man has a more responsible part in the evolution than life, in the state of class consciousness, the human condition is yet only a transitional state. Beyond self-consciousness, there is the selfhood. This is when we realize that we belong to the kingdom of humanity, and that all of the souls in it are interconnected to us, and we're all under the jurisdiction of Brahma, under karma, which is the law. And so we progress under karma, but we have to ask that we be helped, that it has to be a sincere yearning of the heart to realize this selfhood. In other words, the unity of all life. So, if we sacrifice the sense of separateness by service to forms of life which cannot respond in kind, this removes all the barrier of selfishness between ourselves and the full beneficence of those self-realizing beings. So, what does that sentence mean? Forms of life which cannot respond in kind. In other words, the charity we do to all of the kingdoms of nature, including the human kingdom, does not necessarily have to be answered. In other words, we're doing it because it's the right thing to do. But if we do it to the other forms of life, what are those? Animal kingdom, we have the plant kingdom, vegetable kingdom, we have the mineral kingdom, but not only that, we have the elementals that are in all of the kingdoms, and our responsibility is to make them beneficent, just like these beings, the ones who are perfected, have learned to live beneficently with all of life around them, so nothing hinders their lives. Ours is hindered through error and not using our resources correctly. So we need to then make it beneficent. So dedication of a particular day in each year of giving gifts, whether things or thoughts, does not mean that the gifts of wise goodwill to all that lives are ever out of season. So these self-realizing beings are ready to help us at all 4 seasons of the year, not just the 21st, even though this is the crest of the cycle, and everything that we do during this period has added significance to it through the powers of nature. He who knows the smaller cycles will use these as analogies to the states of consciousness that we go through each day. The seasons inhere in the interval of a day, from morning to night and night to morning. So there's a solstice in each minute of our days. There's always an auspicious time when man can move with the cycle's whole force and draw upon the peak of his own power. So this is what we have to put into use. If man aspires, it is stated, the gods descend to meet, and the cycle of the spirit sun within is not limited by human days nor earthly seasons. So then we need to remember that at all times, that we're not just limited to this cycle, but that it is during the whole year that these powers are ready to help, except that this is the crest. This is the highest power, and if we coincide ours to it, then it's additive. It has tremendous power to help us move along. Looked through the literature and found that in the olden days, in antiquity, our ancestors understood what the sun cycle was, and they referred to it in all of their philosophical statements. But not only that, it is all camouflage. They did not give it out as simple facts, but through analogy they hid it. So we cannot just look at what is written and say that our ancestors of old did not know what was happening in the heavens or earth, because they did. It is a well-known fact that the pyramids stand square with the points of the compass, and therefore face sunrise at the time of the equinox. And we just heard that the initiate was carried to a gallery when in the morning the sun hit him in the face with full force. So these pyramids were all arranged in such a way that during sunrise and sunset the sun was able to actually enter into the pyramid. It has been found that many older solar temples of Egypt face the sunrise or sunset at the time of the summer solstice. The medieval cathedrals of Europe were also oriented to the sunrise. The old Basilica of St. Peter's was so exactly aligned to the east that when the doors were opened on the vernal equinox, the sun's rays penetrated through the nave, illuminating the high altar in it. So, the ancient sun worshippers regarded the Great Spirit as a nature god, identical with nature, and the sun as the deity in whom the Lord of life dwells. The Vedas contains hymns to the sky, the dawn, the sun, forming a kind of ritual which was chanted by the priests at sunrise and sunset. So the rising sun of Egypt was Horus, the child god Amen-Ra, the sun in his noontide strength, and Osiris, the setting sun. The sun's representative in the Greek pantheon was Helios, afterwards identified with Apollo. The Phoenician sun was Baal. Agni, the divine fire of the Hindus, is the sun, for the fire and sun are the same. Ormuzd is light, the Zoroastrian sun god, or the life giver. None of the ancients, the sun worshippers included, regarded our visible sun otherwise than as an emblem of their metaphysical central sun god. The belief of all genuine occultists from the earliest times to the present day is that there is a true sun, and that the sun we see is the secondary one. The true center of which the sun in heaven is a symbol and partial reflection of. That which we examine is not a sun at all, but is only an appearance, a mere reflection to us of part of the true one. Moreover, and this is everything that science teaches, against everything that we learn in science, the ancients did not believe what our modern science teaches us, namely that light and heat proceed from our sun. In the Secret Doctrine, this is explained extensively. The sun has no more heat in it than the moon or the space-crowding hosts of sparkling stars. It is simply a reflector. So, considering how little is known of that sun, it is not to be wondered at all that the true sun is not even mentioned in any works except the esoteric works. So then the reflector sun, which is what we see in the sky, sustains the animal economy and guards it. The true sun, it says, shines into us through its medium within our nature. So it's a double beneficent action here. One supports the physical life, but our spiritual life is also supported, because what is it that we always talk about? That the inner self, the real man, is not of this plane, that it uses the physical body as a temple, but it is sustained also and helped along through that medium within our nature that the true sun shines into. And in the Secret Doctrine, it says that the true sun is the heart of our solar system, and its brain is hidden behind the visible sun. So, the occult philosophy defines the visible sun simply as a glowing sphere, the real sun being hidden behind it. The sun is said to give forth 7 rays, and this is important to understand because these are the sun gods that all of these philosophical talks refer to. The 7 rays are the entire gamut of the 7 occult forces or gods of nature, because every philosophy refers to them as their respective names well prove. Shushumna, perhaps we should put this one up here. Shushumna is the first solar ray. Transmits sunlight, it says, to the moon. The Svaraj, the 7th, which is the synthetical ray, is the same as Brahma. It's the synthetic. Same as Brahma. And Secret Doctrine tells us we're under the rule of Brahma, In other words, all and everything in the universe is under law, because Brahma and law are synonymous. Law. Yep. As each ray stands for one of the creative gods or forces, it is easy to see how important were the functions of the sun in the eyes of antiquity, and why it was deified by the profane. In the Rig Veda, Aditi, primordial substance, is the equivalent of mother space, which is coeval with darkness, which is the root of nature. So, Aditi is primordial substance. And HPB talks about it in the Secret Doctrine quite a bit. Substance. In other words, it's prior to its differentiation. Mother substance is the root of all. So this is the root from which everything comes. And in the Vedic language, Aditi is also called the mother of the gods, Diva Matri. Diva Matri. In other words, from this primary substance, all the gods are created, or they come into existence, including all of the heavenly bodies of our system, sun and the planets as well. So, if we keep that in mind, then we would understand why the solar reference was everywhere in all parts of the globe. This is from the Secret Doctrine, and it needs to be mentioned. So, HPB's explanations in the Secret Doctrine are totally in disparity to what the scientific world believes in. Because we are told that our sun, in its totality, merely detached itself earlier than all the others as the rotating mass was contracted. And then explanation goes on to state that it is the elder, bigger brother of the 7 planets. It is not their father. In other words, the planetary system did not come out of the sun. The sun just coalesced and condensed itself to a bigger ball than the planets, but they all come from the same mother substance. For all of the planets were all comets and suns in their origin. They evolved into momentary life from primeval chaos by aggregation and accumulation and primary differentiations of the eternal matter. So, thus the sons of light clothe themselves with the fabric of darkness. Surya, which is the sun, himself a reflection of the central spiritual sun, is the prototype of all those bodies that evolved after him. So we will stop here and open it for comments and explanations and questions. Yes?
I was reading, you were talking about the temperature of the sun, and I was reading the wide variation of scientists in terms of estimating what the temperature is. So why are scientists now, why are they saying that the sun is so hot, and then the Secret Doctrine says it's really not hot at all?
No, it's not incandescent. It has no heat. Well, if we accept what is in the Secret Doctrine, then we have to accept all of it or none of it, because the philosophy depends on understanding of the 3 fundamental propositions. everything goes back to it. If we don't understand that and we cannot apply it to everything that is being said in that book, it has absolutely no value. You cannot take it and make something different out of it according to your limited understanding. It all comes together if you understand the fundamentals. The key here is, if it is a reflector, then it is a window, right? Open into that reality which is behind it. In other words, a reflector is a magnet. It's a magnetizer. The sun is a magnet. It's a gigantic magnet. Everywhere explanations are given about it, where it says that it, what's the right word? In other words, it takes whatever it wants from all of the universes, because it's a magnet. It draws what it needs out of each and everything, the sun. But at the same time, it gives physical life, because it shines in the sky, in the heavens, and the light is what gives heat, the light ray. We just talked about Shushumna and Usvaraj. Usvaraj being the synthetic ray. What is a synthetic ray? When we put the white light through a prism, we get the spectrum through it, do we not? All the way from red to violet. Red, orange, yellow, green, what else? Blue, and then there's dark blue, and then it ends up with purple, violet. So Shushumna is the first one, but Swaraj is the synthetic, all of it, in other words, is in it. So the white light is the Logos, it is stated in the Secret Doctrine. Who is the Logos? It's that central spiritual center that everything comes from. And so we're now saying that behind this sun, which is a window cut into that reality which controls it at the archaic level behind it, you either accept it or you reject it. But if you do not accept it, none of the rest makes any sense either, because we were told that all these planets were suns in a previous cycle. They are at first comets. Everything that is in that heaven from the primordial substance, when the differentiation starts, it becomes cometary. This is in the Secret Doctrine. And when it loses its tail, then it settles into the circulatory movement of the gyrations, and then through aggregation, it builds itself a body, in other words. What is the aggregation? The nebula, the nebular stuff, star dust. Do we not have that in us? We do. We are made of a star dust too. Our astral body is a star dust. So if we don't accept this philosophy in its complete explanation, it doesn't have any value, because we cannot take part of it and then make something different, which quite a few Theosophists have made that adjustment, but it cannot be changed. It can be given in different ways, but the content has to remain the same. This comes from the Master's Lodge. If we change it, then what is the value of it? It becomes pseudo-philosophical stuff, which does not mean anything. In fact, we're warned that changing it makes it very dangerous to people who have no idea about the philosophy, and they're coming into it for the first time, and they're given all this misinformation in reality. Because when we first come into it, it is quite difficult to interpret the Secret Doctrine. It requires a lot of staying power with it to eventually have intuitive powers to understand it at different levels. So then, here it is. All these rays are the gods that we're referring to. We just need to correlate our understanding to what is being said. So, In the secret doctrine, it is stated that the planets are the domains of various beings, having a mysterious, unbroken, and powerful connection with men and the globes. Every heavenly body is the temple of a god. These gods themselves are the temples of God, the unknown. So the secret doctrine refers to God. One God is the unknown, because it exists. There's an absolute reality behind everything that comes into the phenomenal world. Every world has its parent, a star, and sister planet. Thus, Earth is the adopted child and younger brother of Venus, but its inhabitants are of their own kind. Our planet, like all those we see, is adapted to the peculiar state of its human stock, that state which enables us to see with our naked eye the sidereal bodies which are coessential with our terrene plane and substance, just as their respective inhabitants, Jovians, Jupiter, Martians, Mars, and others, can perceive our little world, because our planes of consciousness, differing as they do in degree, but being the same in kind, are on the same layer of differentiated matter. And that's the only reason why we can see it, because our consciousness is of that substance, of that matter. And it says here, the informing intelligences which animate these various centers of being are referred to indiscriminately beyond the great range as the Manus, Rishis, the Pitris, which are our progenitors and so on, and as Dhyani Buddhas, the Chohans, fire gods, Bodhisattvas, and others. There are 7 chief groups of Dhyan Chohans, which groups will be found and recognized in every religion, for they are the primeval 7 rays. Primeval. Seven rays. And we just talked about them. Shushumna being the first and the Swaraj being the synthetic all. Humanity occultism teaches us is divided into 7 distinct groups with their subdivisions: mental, spiritual, and physical. So, with the 7 great races to be born on it. The first race, it says, is born under the sun. The second under Jupiter. The third under Venus. The fourth race is born under the moon and Saturn, the dark. The fifth under Mercury. So the 7 planets were held as sacred and ruled by these highest regions or gods. So then a complete explanation of it is given. So these 7 rays are the 7 gods of nature. They constitute the 7 primary forces, the 7 Dhyan Chohans, in other words, and we just read that there is a link between them and us, and it's never broken. They're called the heavenly snails on account of their formless intelligences inhabiting their starry and planetary homes, so to speak, carrying them as the snails do along with themselves in their revolution. The 7 allow the mortal to see their dwellings, but show themselves only to the Arhat, says an old proverb. Dwelling, standing here for the planets themselves. So, according to this explanation, then the planets are under their jurisdiction. There are 7 of them, so there's obviously 7 sacred planets, but we're not told all of them, just a few of them are given. And the explanation is that the sun and the moon is not in that equation, because the sun is a star of our planetary system and the moon is the mother of Earth. It's a dead planet, in other words. So the 7 is given, but not in all of its details. And the logos, every universe has its own logos, says the doctrine. It is explained that the hosts of Dayan Chohans, who are the divine intelligences charged with the supervision of the cosmos, form the manifested verbum of the unmanifested logos, or the word, and constitute at one and the same time the mind of the universe and its immutable law. We can say this very few times and not truly understand all of what it is being said here, because it is comprehensive in the details given in the secret doctrine. So the Lord of Wisdom, it says, is Mercury or Buddha. It is a well-known astronomical fact that Mercury receives 7 times more light and heat from the sun than Earth does, and Venus 3 times more, and it gives 1/3 of it to Earth. The Venetians, explains the secret doctrine, is our alter ego, and they are, I think they just came out of obscuration, and in future ages they're going to influence Earth a lot more than that has happened before, and they're in their 7th cycle. So it means that they're all perfected beings, however their humanity is. It is explained in the secret doctrine that all these planets have their inhabitants, but it belongs to that particular planet, and that we should not judge life on all the other planets from the viewpoint of Earth, because Earth is not amongst the 7 sacred planets either. So the ancients then, to give us this philosophy, knew all this themselves, but it was so sacred they did not give it out, because they knew that it will be pounced upon by charlatans and of course desecrated. And look what happened to the Christ principle in us, how that got to be changed around and made one finished event in the life of the soul, which is on a continuum. Even that being who was an initiate of the lodge did not stand still for the last 2,000 years. He has gone on to higher realms of perfectibility, because it's all on a continuum. And it is explained in the secret doctrine that the ones that are in charge of the welfare of our humanity in this cycle had gone similar experiences themselves in previous manvantaras and perfected themselves. An angel, HPB says, is not created. It has to evolve into that state of being. So we're all souls. We're all in the developmental stages together, except that we're not at the same place all at the same time. Neither as humanity, neither as nations and cultures all around the globe. We're all at different places. So we are taught not to look at humanity from the physical aspect, but to look at it from the spiritual soul aspect, because it gives it a different significance. Yeah.
So,
yes.
Your reference to God being unknown, that's what Theosophy calls the deity, right? We can get a glimpse of at least aspects of God through the analogy and correspondence, and you talked about the number 7, which is an example of what I'm thinking about, that everything is based on geometrical proportions. The whole universe is.
Yes, indeed it is.
So there's no accidents in nature.
No, but it also says that these 7 primaries are the progenitors, the Pitris and so forth. They have different names, we just mentioned them. Rishis, Devas, Pitris, they're just referred to in different ways. But we just read also from the Secret Doctrine that these rays are the 7 primary nations or 7 primary humanities put on earth. So we obviously come from one of these Dayan Shohans, it is stated here. So the powers of nature are real. Our connection to them is also real. That they descend to help is also accounted for, because without help we can never achieve higher states of consciousness. It is because those states belong to the soul. It's not the physical brain that is going to achieve it, it's the soul that is going to pull the thief up. So that is also a fact. The thief being the lower self, it can never achieve going higher on its own. It requires help. So this yearning of the heart for awakening to that soul life has to be a sincere effort, continued on for a very, very long time. And Mr. Judd says we have to ask often enough for that help eventually to come. And he makes the statement that it is an internal process and that it arrives at the appointed time that is appropriate to that soul. So those of us who are awakened cannot say, well, the others are unawakened, because we were in that pot somewhere along the line too. And so those who are awakened have a greater responsibility in the dissemination of this philosophy to help all our brothers and sisters to awaken to that inner life. And to answer your question directly, it is unknown, not unknowable, but it is written in every philosophical explanation that all you can know is through yourself. In other words, these levels of consciousness, the higher levels of consciousness, we're talking about a higher mind, buddhi, higher mind entity, Mahat, Manas, Mahat being the universal cosmic aspect, Manas, and we always talk about the higher and the lower, but the higher mind entity is part of that triadic S. And we always put it this way, that this is the real man, and that it goes from life to life to life. So my Atma Buddhi Manas makes that triadic reality which goes from one life to another. In other words, is on a continuum. So how can we really accept death as a final thing? Because it's simply a change of consciousness. We drop the body, but the inner man, that triad, is alive from life to life to life. It is the real man, the inner man. So anything that we know of this is through our own ray, which is in us. So the informing comes from within. Even though we get help from the outside, each human soul then progresses under law, under karma, with the help of brothers and sisters who are perhaps a little bit further on the way, and also the forces of nature that come to help us, which is not just this period. We just read that there's a solstice in all of us all through the year, because depending where your cycle is, you have to kind of write the peak. So if we correspond it to this season, then it gives it added force. And so from that perspective, it is important.
I think about this season and the cycle. We talk about cycles a lot. And I'm looking at that triangle there. That triangle, that individuality, if you will, Buddhimanas is what you talk about there.
Yeah, the spirit,
higher aspect.
the spiritual soul, and mind is that triadic essence.
So that never was not, and it never shall not be, and it just goes in this huge cycle, right? Down, it's a life wave down through matter.
Yeah, it descends from the spiritual
to what we call heaven in the Christian world, which is the quote eternity, the time which we spend one with the deity, and then we go back through this process again, right?
Everything comes from that central spiritual sun. The root, Aditi, the primordial substance, is the root of everything, including Diva Matri, the gods themselves. So we also are spiritual because we are a ray from one of these primaries. So that ray goes through all of the experiences of life. It descends into matter, and according to the Secret Doctrine, page 200, Secret Doctrine 1, we have now come halfway, and we're now on our outward journey, which requires self-induced, self-devised effort. In other words, we're as solid as we are going to be. From now on, the world and us are going to be etherealized, whatever that means, which means that we're going to see through substance, whether it means we're going to be ethereal with the environment or we are going to have capabilities to do it with. The student does not know. But we can all read the Secret Doctrine and obtain these inklings from it, which is quite enlightening to the mind, because we are inner men. We are the inner men. The body is just its temple. We do not identify ourselves with the physical body, but unfortunately a lot of people do. When we look in the mirror, this is what we see, and we think this is who we are, but we are not. It's just its temple. It occupies it during earth life, and it leaves it at the end of the duration that was assigned to it when it came in. The soul knows when it comes, when it's going to depart. It is not a secret to it. It's the physical man that does not know. The inner man does.
Very few people in the West really identify with anything other than the physical body.
Well, we have had all this training for the last almost 1800 years. We have accepted the, we have been persecuted. Humanity has been persecuted to accept this dogma that human minds came up with, because we didn't understand the real philosophy, and the real philosophy was not given wholly poly to everybody. It was definitely hidden and camouflaged. It was only given to those who were ready to receive it. And to this day, the same process continues. Even though the Secret Doctrine has been written, she says we just barely lifted up the cover. The Secret Doctrine in its entirety, she tells us, cannot be put in thousands of books like that one. It's so vast, but it is recorded in emblematic hieroglyphic language on a page of something impermeable paper, and that's what the Secret Doctrine starts with. She's looking at an impermeable page with the disc on it, and at first the disc doesn't have anything in it, then the disc has a central point which indicates Manvantara activity.
Well, one more quick question. You use seven a lot, sevenfold nature of man, and all this we talk about sevenfold nature. There's also a sevenfold nature of the universe. Mm-hmm. And can we correlate those? I'm not asking you to do that now. I think it's a loaded question. You can do that.
The Secret Doctrine does.
Right.
We have,
Secret Doctrine does.
sevenfold nature. Mr. Judge has written quite a lot on it, and we have given it here before. We will do so in the future. And since we are the microcosm of the macrocosm, obviously we're a miniature copy of our universe we live in. So all of the forces in the universe have their correlatives in ourselves.
The science used to say that there were 9 planets. Now it says there are 8 planets, the way I understand it. But we still have that difference between what the Sacred Doctrine says we have 7, right?
No, 7 are the sacred planets, but they don't really tell us who they are, what they are, just a few of them. But it also states that the ancients knew a lot more planets than even what our scientists know today.
They knew about Pluto and all
But
that.
we're talking about the solar system here, and it's 7 sacred planets,
So
all of which is not given.
It's talking apples and oranges almost, the way I face the question. So
Well,
I got you.
the scientific world has to eventually come to the recognition of the astral world, and when that comes about, then they will be on their way to the discovery of truth. Without that inner perceptive power, these levels of consciousness with their substance cannot be found out. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Hope you can join us next week as well.